Welcome to the PSLA Leadership Insight Series. And today we have with us Casey Coleman of Salesforce. So welcome, Casey.
Thanks, Martha. I'm really glad to be here. It's good to see you again.
You too. Casey and I are old friends and colleagues at GSA, and I've known her for many, many years. And I knew that she would be a perfect candidate and guest to this Leadership Insight Series to talk about what she's learned, especially given her background. So Casey spent some time in the private sector, which you can go into a little more detail, and then came into the government. And when she left, she's in the private sector now with Salesforce. And so why don't you give us a little bit about your background to kind of fill in my holes there?
Thanks, Martha. Yeah, I've been all over the place and had kind of a hopscotch career. I started off in a large company. It's now part of Lockheed Martin. I was an engineer doing Army programs and then had the opportunity to come to Washington from Dallas. I'm from Texas and spend a year on the Hill as a legislative aide and congressional fellow. And I really thought that was interesting and I loved Washington, D.C. But after that year was over, I returned to Texas and moved into the small company tech startup space and worked for a couple of different startups doing sales and customer support. And then 9/11 occurred. And I really felt at the time that I wanted to be part of the national rebuilding that was happening and the sense of unity and the need to recover from that. And so I reconnected with some people I'd worked with on the Hill and found my way into the executive branch with GSA, the General Services Administration, and spent 12 years there. That's where we met and worked
Right.
together and had just a really interesting variety of opportunities and work experiences and spent the last part of that 12 years, almost 7 years, as the CIO for the agency. And then left GSA and went to AT&T. I spent about a year there and then moved on to a role at Unisys. And now I've been almost 4 years at Salesforce. So I've been, I think, in a variety of different roles. And then even my time in government saw time in the Bush administration, the Obama administration. I was experienced presidential transitions and have had a variety of roles that I think kind of make me either well-rounded or pretty diversified.
Well, I think that that experience, I had it right in my head, but I was afraid to mention a company that wasn't right. So I'm glad we filled it in. Your career with as a political appointee and career really gives you a good perspective on, like you said, presidential transition and working as a career in a different administrations.
Mhm.
And so, can you give us some of your advice, or as people are going through the career, people are now in an agency waiting for the inauguration. We're in a very strange time with an outgoing president and an incoming administration. So what should they be thinking of right now as they're positioning themselves for a new team coming in?
It's a really interesting opportunity because any time of change is a time of opportunity. And you're right, Martha. I started off at GSA as a Schedule C political appointee in the early part of the first Bush 43 term, and then later applied for a different role as a career senior executive and got that and spent almost 11 years as a career SES. And in that at that level went through the transition to the Obama administration. So one of the key challenges on both sides, career and appointee, is building trust and working effectively. And I think, as having spent so much more time as a career senior executive, the incoming political appointees are on the clock and they are in a sprint. And the career senior executives and career civil servants are really there for the long term. They provide continuity and subject matter expertise, and they're really the people who get the work done and execute the policies that the appointees set out. So that is a moment to, when they come in, new appointees, it's really a moment to build trust, to understand the pace and the urgency that they're bringing, and to try and provide some quick, responsive action that will help them fulfill their priorities in a way that also executes the mission of the agency that you're charged with over the longer term.
I
That
couldn't agree with you more. I think that trust, of course, is critical, and then understanding the role that each play in the operation of government is really critical as well. Do you have any leadership challenges that you faced on either side, political or career, that you would want to share, or and any ways of overcoming those challenges?
Well, one lesson I learned is, and I learned this from a mentor of mine who said you need to be prepared because you really have one opportunity to make a good first impression. And we all know that's true, but it really has it really is especially true now when incoming appointees feel such a sense of urgency. And so I would say to anyone who's in a career position to be thinking about and understanding what are going to be the priorities of the new leadership. Now, there's a lot of continuity, a lot of programs stay the same, their priorities and their mission don't change, but the nuance is, what does this team want to get done? Be thinking about that and be thinking about how you help to carry that out and bring forward ideas and solutions. When we were at GSA, we had a plan for the transition between the Bush and Obama teams. We had a set of initiatives that we proposed to carry out to help execute their priorities. And so the incoming administrator and I met, and she picked the top ones that she wanted done. And you may remember they were things that helped the agency move into the new generation of technology.
Right.
So telework and updated connectivity to be able to work anytime, anywhere with any device. And she charged us with doing that within the first 12 weeks of her time there. And it was crazy, but we were prepared. And so we were able to turn on a dime and make that happen. And I remember the due date was Flag Day, which is in June. And we got it done a couple of days before that. So that was really remarkable team effort, but we couldn't have done it if we hadn't been planning and thinking in advance.
I'm not sure, do you know the significance of Flag Day at the why she picked that date?
I do. Do you know?
I do, I was there.
I think it was the date that GSA first was the first agency to get email and internet access
Correct.
for everyone
Yeah,
in the agency.
it was. So, that was, that doesn't surprise me about her, so, but that's interesting, I didn't realize that. But it's a good segue into agencies, and I know that, at Salesforce, you're working with agencies to, to help them modernize their infrastructures. So how do you, agencies that have really been able to pivot in terms of telework, service to their customers, what do you think has been the drivers or the success factors that they've been able to do that? I know GSA has your work at GSA really enabled them to be able to pivot really smoothly.
I do have the good fortune of working with government agencies all across the government and around the world in this role. And one thing that is true time and time again is the ones that have been most successful coming through the pandemic and responding to their constituents and stakeholders is the ones that were thinking from the outside in. You know, so much of government is organized from the inside out. Programs and budgets and organizational structures and systems are all set up to reflect the bureaucracy rather than to reflect their customer and to organize around those they serve. It's not always a customer, but it's always someone that their mission serves. And so I think you have to start from the outside in and think about the service experience. And I know, or Martha, this is really what you've organized
Music to
your
my ears.
career around is serving the
Right.
customer. But it really is true. If you're thinking about that service experience and you're organizing your service delivery and your mission around that, you it drives a lot of fundamentally healthy and progressive and successful actions beyond that.
How about, I mean, you can tell Casey's in a Airstream, right, camper
I
in
am, yes.
Texas, working remotely, and I've been working at home for the last year myself, and I know that agencies are starting to express, leaders and workers, at all levels, starting to express, um, you know not discontent, but they wish that they were more connected to their agency, to their teams. And in
Mm.
the private sector, most people do work remotely. So do you have any advice for leaders in the government, specific practices for how to how to keep your teams connected and really manage for results too.
Mhm. Yeah, and you've, I think, got to take into account that the the whole your whole team is affected by this, and they're affected as people, not just as employees. And so you've got to be thinking of the human element and the human side of the equation. And part of that comes with understanding the strain that this puts on people and being empathetic and leading with empathy. And I've been really just encouraged and heartened myself at how our company has done that. We have weekly town hall meetings where our leaders tell us about what's going on, and we have an opportunity to ask questions. There's a really transparent and open chain of communication. And then at my level, our team has we have a social hour every week where everyone on the team is invited to just show up and not talk about work, but talk about what's going on that is sort of the lighter side or the human side of
Right.
what
Right.
we're experiencing. So part of it is just having two-way communication and listening, leading with empathy, and creating space to connect as people.
I think that's a great idea in terms of connecting as people. And I always told my teams that if you go through your career and you don't have some disaster that's going on in your life, whether it's your health, your husband's health, a divorce, parents' health, something that
Hmm.
is distracting, that we're all a team. And so being able to work together as a team during those times is really important, and being able to count on your teammates and vice versa. Whenever somebody on your team is going through something, trying to be there for them to help them through that. So I think, connecting as a human being and talking to people about what's going on in their life helps to like calm things down and just really know them as people. So kudos to
And
you.
being a little bit vulnerable and open and
Right.
not always trying to have your, your leadership, I
Right.
don't know, face on.
Right.
Um, I think that's important too.
I couldn't agree more. Well, you when you were well, both in government and industry, I know you've hired and promoted a lot of people. What kind of qualities do you look for when you're I'll say Casey looks really sweet, and she is really sweet. But she's tough too. And I think that those are good qualities, right? Like you got to be able to make those tough decisions. I've been listening to some stuff around Abraham Lincoln and his leadership skills, and he was not able to fire people. He really let people go far beyond
Mm.
where he should have before he would put, replace them with other people. So what are some of your leadership advice or qualities that you look for?
Well, it's an interesting question because when I first came into the CIO role at GSA, I asked the team what they needed from me for them to be able to do their best work. And from what they shared with me and my observations about the culture, I created a really short list of leadership principles that I put on an orange sticky note. And maybe I'll send you a photo of it, but I kept it through the whole time there because it proved to be really kind of useful across the whole engagement of the time I was there. And really at the top of the list is the obvious ethics and integrity in everything we do. That's just fundamental. But then went on to think about culture. And the old saying that culture eats strategy for
Right.
lunch. And the idea there is that culture is going to be what really is influential about how people work together rather than strategy. And so we tried to create a culture that was really intentional because you're going to have a culture and it's the one that you planned for, or it's going to be the one that emerges organically. And one of the key principles there was to assume good intent and to engage with people looking for win-win outcomes. I find that oftentimes government feels a little zero-sum gain because you have limited resources, and if your program is funded, that probably means a decision had to be made somewhere else to restrain or cut funding somewhere else. So that kind of zero-sum gain mentality can create opposing or adversarial kind of incentives. But if you look beyond that, we have a common mission. We're all motivated by the spirit of public service. There's a lot of things that people agree on and can come around and support. And if you really start by being very intentional about win-win outcomes and looking for the the outcome that lifts up or brings success to people around the table, I think that's a useful place to start.
Yeah, those are really great. I love and I agree with you about you're going to have a culture, whether you intentionally create the
Yeah.
culture or you just let it happen to you, you're going to have a culture. So, I love all of those. Like if you were, giving advice to rising managers or within
Mhm.
the government, what would you tell them to do to rise, to
Yeah.
be promoted or to rise to higher levels within the government? Because it seems like whenever you talk to people, it's all about they want to get to that next level. I'm interested to hear. I have
Mhm.
my version of this, but anyway, we'll.
Well, I really want to hear your thoughts on that because I know you rose from the very most entry level position to career senior executive running big multi-million dollar programs. And maybe we'll have some of the same ideas. I think two of the key qualities and success factors for rising leaders are tenacity and resilience. Especially in the government, you have so many stakeholders that you have to confer with, and decision making is so diffuse. You've really got to be good at building coalitions, and you've got to be good at staying on it. And I sometimes think about the analogy of water. Water always flows downhill, and it flows around a rock, it flows over it, it'll build a channel over time. And what started off as a stream becomes something like the Grand Canyon.
Right.
So the simple power of water flowing downhill has enormous consequences over time. So that points to tenacity. And then you've also got to have resilience because there's setbacks, there's slowdowns, you get told, no, we can't do that a lot, and you have to find a way forward in an appropriate fashion. So you've got to be resilient and you've got to be able to put up with what seems like defeat and pushback all the time.
I think those are great to kind of boil it down. What I was thinking was about focusing on the work at hand and getting the work done. Too many
Absolutely.
people do focus on how can I position myself for a promotion, or I'm not going to do this unless I get a promotion. And
Yeah.
I think focusing yourself on getting your job done and being there for the right reason also. uh,
Mhm.
I would say for me, persistence, maybe that's the same as resilience, but persistence, especially around the customer experience
Mhm.
stuff, helped me a lot. But in closing out, I just wanted to see if there's anything else that you would want to talk about in terms of leadership advice that you have, and then or anything you haven't shared. So I'll start there.
Well, one thing that is a constant is that technology is always changing and technology has become more and more important to getting the job done. It's no longer just the province of the IT shop. It really is the enabler for everything we do. And so I think it and in general, we are seeing change all around us. Industries are changing, more information coming our way. So I think it's important for everyone to take responsibility for being their own stewards and their own, take continue learning, continue to grow, be open to new ways of doing things, and continue to keep a intellectual curiosity about how the world is changing and growing and advancing. Because if you don't, you'll find that your skills don't stay relevant. The things we know today are not going to be the critical skills for our jobs in a few years' time. So stay open to learning and growing.
Well, I'm so happy that you brought that up because I felt like even when I was in the government, I didn't do that as much as I should have because I was so busy, like keeping the trains on the
Yeah,
track.
we all
But
are.
but but I think that since I've been out of the government, I've spent a lot of my time learning new areas, you know, learning about new things and more of a thirst for learning than I've ever had in my life. So I think that was a great suggestion. So if you had a crystal ball and you were thinking about, a year from now or 5 years from now, how do you think that citizens will be interacting with government, or how do you think businesses will be interacting with government? How does this whole ecosystem look?
One of the things that I'd say characterizes me is I'm an optimist, and I really think that technology, as complicated as it makes our lives, is also undeniably brought us tools to do things better. And we see this in every industry. Think about how we bank and shop and interact with our friends and just live our lives. Technology has made it easier to do that in a way that's connected and personalized and intuitive. And I think that's going to continue to characterize public service and government service delivery a lot more. This COVID outbreak has forced a lot of innovation. So, as tragic as it has been, it's provided a silver lining in really pushing some innovation with things like digital signatures and being able to have virtual telehealth meetings, being able to work from home like we're doing today. So I think that that's going to continue to, that innovation is going to continue, and we're going to see improved service delivery and a way that I hope builds trust and executes the role of government more effectively.
I couldn't have said it better. And I love the trust in government piece. So thank you so much for sharing your insights today. Again, we have Casey Coleman from Salesforce, and she shared more insights than I even expected. So thank you so much. And we will let you know when this is out for public consumption.
Thanks, Martha. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Casey.